Welcome to State Scoop's Priorities Podcast. I'm Keely Quinlan, a reporter with State Scoop. This week, I interviewed Angela Siefer, Executive Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, regarding new developments in the litigation between the Trump administration and her nonprofit. The NDIA sued the federal government last fall over the cancellation of the Digital Equity Act and its $1.25 billion Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, which was one of the Act's 3 grant programs. In a joint status report filed in the case last week, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration said it plans to restore those funds and reopen applications, and it couldn't come at a better time for communities in need. But first, here's what's happening in state and local government technology news this week. A recent audit of Oregon's decades-old prison information systems found that the aging tech threatens the correction department's ability to manage its prison safely. The audit, which was released by the Oregon Secretary of State, found that the decades-old mission-critical systems that support inmate records, sentencing, parole and probation, security operations, and other core functions pose growing operational risks if they are not modernized. The auditors argued that the decades-old system threatens the department's ability to manage its prisons safely, collect meaningful operational data, and implement reforms. They urged state lawmakers to take action and make modernization a priority. As the 2026-2027 school year gets underway, the nonprofit Consortium for School Networking on Monday released a new free guide to help school districts navigate the growing number of state and local policies regarding screen time and technology use in schools. A number of states, including Alabama, Iowa, Tennessee, and Utah, have new rules on the books this school year, with some mandating districts institute written technology use or screen time policies with minute-based use, or directing them to develop their own rules around things such as designated lesson use, AI use, and age-appropriate use. California Governor Gavin Newsom and first partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom on Tuesday announced the launch of a statewide Teen Tech Council to give young people a bigger role in shaping conversations around technology, social media, and digital wellness across the Golden State. The council's launch comes as debates over youth technology use increasingly moved beyond social media to include AI tools, online safety, and the role of technology in schools. The Trump administration moved to cancel billions of dollars in digital equity funding in early 2025, prompting the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and other groups to challenge that decision in court. A federal judge ultimately ordered the administration to restore some of that funding, and now the NTIA says it plans to reopen the application process for the $1.25 billion in grants. We are joined this week by Angela Siefer, Executive Director of the NDIA, to talk about the latest developments surrounding the Digital Equity Act. And we're going to talk about what that actually means for communities and organizations that were counting on this funding and what happens next.
In the recent joint status report, both NDIA and the Trump administration needed to say where we stood on what the judge was suggesting. He didn't suggest, he told. When the judge said, I'm going to sever the racial and ethnic minorities as a covered population, and the government has said they're going to move forward. And so then it was asking each side to respond to that. And the government did. NDIA wasn't ready to respond yet, so we will be doing that in the next joint status report, which is due this coming Monday. So this is all moving very quickly. But in the one that's already been submitted, the federal government said we are moving forward with the Digital Equity Act Competitive Grant Program, which was the first time we had seen a legal document where they stated that in writing.
So what does this mean that they say that they're going to move forward to it and potentially reopen applications for this one grant program, right, within the Digital Equity Act? Like, how are you guys interpreting that announcement? How did you guys receive that news, basically?
We received that news as, okay, Digital Equity Act Competitive Grant Program is moving forward because they stated so very clearly. They also stated that they want that to happen in December of 2026. NDIA has not yet responded as to when we think is the right time for that. But the fact that the government said December 2026 tells us that they are going to move forward. So what we're telling folks out there who had applied before or who would like to apply for these funds is to start preparing. We don't know what the NOFO will look like. That's still something to be discussed. But the fact that it will move forward means that it makes sense for folks to figure out who their partners are. If you're going to work with someone else, which, collaborative projects are always good, then they should go ahead and be figuring that out.
Yeah. And so the competitive grant program is one of three that was created by the Digital Equity Act, and it's $1.25 billion. I think that's a lot of money. How confident are you that the funding will actually be restored? Like, I think with the federal government at present and this administration, right? It's so easy to be like, well, they said this, but the follow through, the track record has not been exactly stellar, if you know what I mean. So, where is y'all's confidence level with this?
My confidence is more concerned that they may would move forward and not follow the letter of the law. So everybody can read what Congress stated in the Digital Equity Act and how those funds were to be used. So my concern is that that could not be followed as closely as it should be. And maybe this is misplaced of me, but I do feel like it is going to move forward just because I don't know. I mean, I hear you that they have already not followed through on things they said they were going to do. But there's also a part of me that I have to think that we're going to do this, that Digital Equity Act Competitive Grant Program will be a reality just because we have to plan for a future in which something positive is happening. Otherwise, I don't think my soul can take more of this.
No, fair enough. Totally. And kind of going to that, I think it speaks to the incredible importance of this program that the NDIA took the extraordinary step of suing the Trump administration after this was canceled. I guess looking back, like, what did you all think was at stake when you decided to bring that lawsuit? Like, and what does this latest development kind of mean for those stakes? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper in terms of like what is troubling your soul, if as it were?
Yes, so many things trouble my soul. Uh, this country, I mean, the whole world really is in this technological kind of revolution uh, that has changed the way we all live. And if we leave out whole swaths of the population from that, it impacts everybody, not just those people. It impacts the communities they live in. It impacts the whole country. It impacts the United States' ability to be competitive globally. So I find it kind of surprising that those who care about competitiveness have not recognized how important it is that we bring everybody along on this journey. Uh, and so when the Digital Equity Act was canceled, it was a blow, not just to NDIA and to all of our affiliates, but I feel like to the whole country because we really were on a path to be able to more clearly define which strategies work in which communities and under what circumstances, and the fact that they had the Digital Equity Act in congressional language requires evaluation of these programs and encourages a fifth year just for evaluation. The Digital Equity Act has the potential to be able to provide us with that data to show us what works, what doesn't work, and then see the impacts in communities because we haven't had this level of investment in the past. I would also argue we need even greater investment, that this is really just this is one investment that is essential, but we need sustainable funding for this issue for all the reasons that I already stated.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. It needs to be part of the larger picture, right? And I want to go back for a moment and touch on what you mentioned up at the top that, this court victory, of course, came with a really important caveat was that the ruling removed members of minorities and ethnic populations from the list of covered populations within the program. Could you talk on that just a little bit and kind of how that changes the program in practice, if at all?
That also makes 0 sense to me. The list, there were 8 covered populations included that Congress listed, and it was to make sure that those populations were included. It was not to indicate any kind of exclusion of other populations. So the fact that this administration did not like those words, and the fact that the judge agreed to remove those words is still doesn't make sense to me, is troubling, because we do need everybody to be participating in this digital economy. And the fact that racial and ethnic minorities have been left out of so many things, right? Like housing and jobs. And this has been for hundreds of years. Separating out those words sends a message that racism isn't real, or that these that racial and ethnic minorities have not been left out. So that is troubling for the country as a whole. In terms of implementing this grant, when the applicants are rolling out their programs, they will still and should still serve racial and ethnic minorities. That would in fact be real racism, right? To intentionally not serve those populations. And so we really need to make sure that that message is clear, that everyone needs to be served by these grant funds.
Right. And I think part of that too comes down to the misunderstanding of what it is that equity actually is and is aiming to accomplish, right?
I think
Um,
that's 100% right, Kaylee.
yeah. And so, ahead of these funds being dispersed, right? Like I think of something really important to note is that like when this was canceled back in May of 2025, grants were already in the process. Like the funding of course had not been yet dispersed, but like awards had been made. These organizations such as, the NDIA, of course, were already expecting these funds. Organizations had hired staff, built programs, and made passive investment ahead of the expectation that these grants were coming. So, what does that disruption, I guess, looks like on the ground over the past year? And how do we move forward, right? Is it enough to just say like, oh, we're going to reopen them in December?
Yeah, I don't think it is enough. You're absolutely right. We saw lots of organizations who had really scaled up, so they would be shovel ready to be able to move very quickly. NDIA did that. We went and recruited 13 organizations to be part of our grant proposal so that we could get those funds into smaller community based organizations that are trusted by the communities they serve. And then with the cancellation, uh, not only did NDIA need to scale down, but others did too across the country. NDIA's grant was for 25 million, and we had a contract and we thought it was going to be moving forward, and then it just all stopped. I think what we also saw across the country, when every state was creating a digital equity plan, which we should say is awesome, and those plans still exist, and that's an amazing accomplishment. But what we saw with the creation of those plans was more digital inclusion ecosystems and coalitions in communities across the US forming, and people talking to each other and figuring out what they jointly agreed were their goals and their strategies within their own communities. And that was amazing. We've retained some of that. We've definitely lost some of that also. When there is funding, it moves things forward. I mean, this is why funding gets allocated for any purpose, because it moves things forward. So, one of the things we need now is for philanthropy and others who have financial resources to help community based organizations who have digital inclusion programs to get ready for this federal money, to be able to apply for it.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine that in and of itself is such an effort. Like, I think about the amount of work that has gone in from state broadband offices with the BEAD program and just trying to get ready, right, for that kind of application process and then awards and subgrantees and all of that. And kind of piggybacking off of that, the Digital Equity Act was designed to be complementary to broadband infrastructure programs like BEAD by addressing some of the things that like happened after someone has technically secured access to broadband connection, right? Things like devices, digital skills, and technical support. What do you think gets lost in the national broadband internet conversation when we like only primarily focus on building infrastructure?
I think the piece that's lost is the human infrastructure. Some of us are very comfortable going to the internet to solve a technical problem. Others of us really need a human to help us with that. And I mean, you look around and talk to folks, and sometimes it just really does help me to have a conversation about some technical situation for it to make sense to me. And that's true of those who are at the beginning stages of understanding what an application is and how their computer works or which internet service to choose. To have that human there is a big deal, and we don't have a system across the United States for this. We have some programs in certain communities that have digital navigators at the ready for those who need them, but it's not in every community, and we do need that type of system in the US. So I think what we have to figure out is as we're building the infrastructure, how do we increase the broadband subscription rates, make sure that folks have consistent access? Sometimes there's a confusion on, well, how many people have broadband in the United States? It's not a yes or no question. We need consistent access because if one is low income and struggling with bills, sometimes you can pay your internet service bill and sometimes you can't, or you will rely upon a mobile service. Data plan runs out midway through the month. You had service at the beginning of the month and you don't have service at the end of the month. So I think we have to come up with these long-term sustainable solutions to that human side of infrastructure.
Right. Like, I don't think there's a Band-Aid fix for this that will work in any measure of reality.
That's
uh,
right.
so I guess my last and final question for you is like, what happens between now and December? Like, what does the NDIA want to see from the NTIA in the new funding process? And like, what would you consider a successful resolution of this battle, essentially?
We really need Congress's original intent to be how the money is spent. So we need it to go towards helping people choose an internet service provider, helping them have immediate support if that's what they need, having those digital navigation services, ongoing skills training, finding the right device and having that right device. Because a lot of times a low income family relies upon a mobile phone, whereas a tablet or a laptop might be the right choice for their needs. The spot we're in right now, like in terms of the lawsuit, is that there's another joint report due this Monday. So the exact requests or positions, I don't know what the exact legal words are. I should always say I'm not a lawyer. But the exact things that we are stating that we think are necessary for this to move forward will be in that joint report on Monday.
That was Angela Siefer with the NDIA. We are sending our many thanks to her and her organization for her participation in this conversation. You can subscribe to the Priorities Podcast at prioritiespodcast.com and wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, be sure to leave a review or a rating on the podcast page. That small extra step helps more people like you find the show. This podcast is a production of Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Production work is done by Carlin Fisher. Until next week, I'm Keely Quinlan. Thanks for listening.